All right, hello everybody. Roderick
Oh,
Cox here, and I'm happy to be hosting another Million Circle around the mic. And we have Larry Blisle from Race World Offshore down there in Key West, and Lee Stanford up in New Jersey, part of our business development and his own businessman. We have Stu Jones, and he's via telephone. His camera's not working quite right today. And Holly Raschein, Republican state representative down there in Key Largo, Florida. So hello, everybody.
hey, Holly.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Hello, everyone.
So normally what we do is we sort of go all the way around the circle a little bit so everybody can just sort of say where they're at and what it's like. And I can start it off by saying that I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's week 7 of our shelter in place up here, and I've been doing something every day, and I've pretty much lost track of what every day is, just because I keep counting and adding to it, and it's just crazy. So our grocery store shelves, are still pretty barren. We have toilet paper now, so we're in good shape there. But the meats are starting to go down again, and it's a little crazy. But hopefully on May 8th, we're going to start phasing in different things, and then we have like a 3-step phase. So hopefully Charlotte's coming around. So Larry, let's go to you.
Sure. I'm in Key West, and weather's beautiful. Really dead. Not a lot going on. You drive down Duval Street, and it's a ghost town. They opened up beaches and stuff, but I haven't seen any massive people going out there and all that right now. I think, we're just all sitting here wondering what's going to happen. It's like Holly, you'll know, it felt like we've been preparing for a hurricane, and we got our stuff, we put everything together, and now we just waited for the storm. And we don't, at least a hurricane, when it's going to be here, and we know we're going to clean up, and we're going to go, but now we just have not a clue. And it's kind of frightening, and I feel sorry for all the businesses and retail people and all that, because they're hurting. And,
yeah, no doubt.
It's going to get worse, but
no doubt.
Anyway.
All right, Holly, let's go to you.
Sure, and thanks so much, everybody, and good afternoon. And it's a beautiful day in Key Largo as well. We're not too far from Key West. And just to let everybody know, so I'm Holly Raschein, and I have the honor of representing District 120 in the Florida House of Representatives. So our district here is all of the Keys, Key West, all the way to southern Miami-Dade County. So lots of Everglades and some of the agriculture area up there in southern Miami. And things are very similar here. The highway is relatively busy, but not busy as normal. What my office has been busy doing is processing unemployment claims and helping folks out with this sort of short-term economic help. And it is the numbers are staggering. And unfortunately, Monroe County is usually the lowest when it comes to the unemployment rate. And right now, we are actually, given our per capita population, we are number 1 right now in the state. So not exactly the most positive numbers, but I'm very, very encouraged by the governor's directive yesterday, or his latest executive order, and that we're going to sort of start moving into phase 1 of opening up our state, and save for the big counties that are our hot spots, which are Miami-Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County. Monroe County, thankfully, is not included in that sort of tapping the brakes. But yeah, these are certainly interesting times.
They sure are. All right. Hey, Stu Jones, how about going to you?
Things seem to be going quite well here, in spite of, I think it has been about 7 weeks since we've been on lockdown. But, we got 2 teenage boys who appear to be doing okay with the homeschooling. We sort of have to stay on top of them. Mom's pretty good about that. But Jackie, for those of you who don't know, my wife works with me. The 2 of us have been managing to work almost daily. Obviously, we have our own building, our own business, so we can control that environment. We have 2 other people working for us. One is upstairs in the studio. We've been pounding out volume content. It's actually been, the slowdown for us has been a good thing in our media department, as you know, Roderick, because we seem to play catch up all the time, and our business is very much driven by content that we put out there about the power boating lifestyle. On the downside, I would have to say that losing 4 events at the height of our season, so I can share that misery with a lot of people here in Florida in the travel industry.
Right.
We are very travel driven. We canceled our Key West event in March. We canceled a big event in Tampa for April. 2 events in May. One was to Bimini in the Bahamas. One was up in Orange Beach, Alabama. So we pretty much, our revenue dried up completely on that side of our business, but our business has a lot of different facets of revenue generation. So we've still been okay. The sponsors have continued to support us because of our content generation efforts. The memberships, the people who are members of the club have allowed us to continue to renew their membership. So financially, we're doing okay. We've applied for some funding, but we're not a very big company, so not really entitled to much in the way of that. But we did get a little $5,000 incentive from the federal government. We also applied to state, but we haven't gotten any news there. So we're faring well, I think socially well, because our neighbors are all pretty nice people, and we get together and we do social distancing parties in the street and everything. So life is different, and I think we'll be fine to adapt to this new normal. I think we all will be.
It will definitely be a new normal. So I appreciate that, Stu. All right. Finally, last but not least, Lee Stanford, Business Development Director for Race World Offshore and business owner in New Jersey. Lee.
Yeah, thank you very much. Central New Jersey is a very condensed state. We have the highest density of population in the United States, and we're definitely feeling that. And you see that in our numbers for this particular pandemic. But the people of New Jersey are resilient, and we will come out of this. Boating in New Jersey has somewhat returned. I live on the Matineconk River, which is a large bay area in New Jersey, and that saw a lot of boats over the weekend. So I was very pleased to see that. Ramps were open, marinas were operating, so that's good. My company, we employ 22 here in Central New Jersey. We're fortunate. We received PPP money, and that's allowed us to keep our employees going. And we're an essential service. We provide safety equipment to the marine industry. So that's been our story in New Jersey. And behind the scenes for Race World, we are working, Larry, Roderick, and myself, working on plans for the upcoming races. And we're very fortunate to have this forum to say hi to everyone, Holly and everyone. So Stu, thank you all very much for attending.
Right. Thanks, Lee. I appreciate that. And definitely what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 weeks and how we sort of got to this. And just for those who don't know what milling circle is, it's a offshore racing term where the boats sort of leave the cranes and the ramp when they go out for a race, and they go out to a point out on the race course and mill in a circle, and they wait for the pace boat to come get them and start racing. And so for Larry Blisle, who's the owner and president of Race World Offshore, the premier offshore sanctioning body for offshore powerboat racing, and 3rd year, I believe, right, Larry? And Stu Jones, is the Poker Run King, and he produces events all around, the Gulf Coast and Midwest, and surely all of Florida and the Bahamas, and takes people on cart stops, and ultimately ends up in Key West, Florida, with last year over 265 boats, Stu?
269 registered teams.
269, so missed it by a couple there. So that's fantastic. So that's a little synopsis of all of us. And this time, non-racer, maybe Holly is a racer, but we've been able to include her on this particular episode, and I think which is really exciting because I've had a chance to not be from Florida, but I've gone back and look at some of the interviews and things that you've done, Holly, and a little bit of your tenure there. And so now these are the real hard hitting questions. So for the past, how tough is that going to be? So for the past 7.5 years that you've been there, I guess, as a representative, what are some of the things that you've been the most proud of in that time frame?
Sure, that's a wonderful question, and also a loaded question, because there's lots I think that my team and myself are very proud of. But I think the number one accomplishment that comes to mind is the passage of the Florida Keys Stewardship Act. As you know, the Florida Keys were extremely environmentally sensitive. Our ecosystem is very diverse. We are an economic driver for our entire state. We're home to the third largest reef track in the world. We have wonderful events like the Powerboat races and tournaments and fishing tournaments and so on and so forth. But what all those things depend on is water quality. And so the Florida Keys Stewardship Act that passed back in 2016 dedicates a funding source for two important components of water quality. Obviously, water projects, water restoration, canal restoration, and also land acquisition. So I've made it my mission in my tenure in the Florida House to bring home as many dollars as possible from the state coffers to support the economic engine of our community, which is the environment. I've also had the opportunity to chair two subcommittees that have been very, very vital to our entire district. A couple terms ago, I chaired the Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee, which dealt with policy having to do with the environment and farming and agriculture. And then this last term, my final term, my senior term, I actually chaired the Agriculture and Natural Resources Appropriations Subcommittee. So the money committee that funds all these important projects like beach renourishment, Everglades restoration, wastewater projects, stormwater projects, all the cool stuff that we have going on around our state that maintains our beautiful environment.
Right. I mean, that's fantastic. And so let me go ahead and reload that and ask you another question then about water quality. What do you think has been the positive for the last maybe 7 weeks or however long with the shelter in place and people and what's been going on in Monroe County and such?
Great question. And I don't know that this just applies to Monroe County. I think it applies to any coastal community, certainly the entire state of Florida and anywhere on the coast. But we're actually, I've heard there's been observations and drones flying around and different testing going on that the water quality is just through the roof right now because there's such limited access. There's no cruise ships moving. There's still people on the water. We have recreational boaters. We still have the commercial fishing guys out there, but sea life is enjoying this. I've heard whales are moving around more. Manatee, they're having actually less manatee rescues, which I think is good. We've had a couple, but I think right now Mother Nature is loving it.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen the news broadcasts on probably too many broadcasts lately, but I've seen it where all the animals, have been starting to come into towns, out in Colorado and Wyoming and different places, and the goats and the moose and everything else.
Alligators everywhere right now in the Everglades, like on the park grounds, like the visitor center and everything.
Yeah, I mean that's got to be unbelievable. I mean when all of a sudden you take 90% of the population, put them inside buildings and they don't go out and cars aren't running. And surely we've all seen over in China where, all the air pollution has been improved and been reduced by unbelievable numbers. So I guess if we can't take away that, in the next 30 years to realize what that effect does have on the environment, because I know we all support the environment. I mean, offshore powerboat racing, plays a big role in making sure that we're very respectful, of the waters, as well as the manatees and all the wildlife involved. And Larry, I know you get to write the checks, when it comes down to that. I know you are a big supporter of the wildlife and how we treat the environment around our races.
Well, I don't know if you know, Holly, but in our races, we have Richard Moretti. He flies around in a helicopter, and
I love that guy.
Yeah,
he's out there watching for turtles and manatees, and he's been great. He goes to all of our races and does that for us. When we do races, we can't start a race until he gives us the all clear. He runs around the race course. He goes out there about half an hour ahead of the race time and runs around in the helicopter. And if they see that there's some turtles or manatees around, then they have some chase boats come around and they sort of ease them out of the way and they take off and go away. So it's nice having him involved in as good as he is, and what he does in Monroe County is fabulous. You know, and I've been reading stuff in the paper yesterday, about the cruise ship industry and in Key West and people wanting not cruise ships.
Mhm.
Me personally, I think, we need cruise ships down here. We need that for our economy. I can't see us going back and not having them around here. It puts a light on what we need to do to regulate them stronger and do all these things. But to say, no, we don't want cruise ships anymore, I think it's like cutting our throats.
Mhm.
But
I
there's
mean,
a lot of talk going on about it now.
Yeah, I bet I've heard.
Yeah.
Holly, were you interviewed recently with the chamber in the newspaper?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
because unfortunately I clicked on it, but I didn't get to see the story, but I just saw an interview.
Sure. So I actually, a week ago, just yesterday, was the speaker for the Key West Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to maintain their agenda. They held their entire Chamber of Commerce meeting via Zoom. We had over 180 people dial in and listen, and it was really an incredible experience. And I gave them an update basically from the state level, what was going on with unemployment, what was the talk of reopening, what effect does this pandemic have or will have on the state budget? Not a good one. And then I got my favorite part, and you talk about being in the hot seat, is the Q&A. And there were several good opinions that came up, questions, and obviously reopening our community and giving the economy the shot in the arm that it needs was the top topic. But I did just want to highlight a little bit on the cruise ships. There are so many businesses down, especially in Key West, that I don't know if they 100% depend on the cruise ship industry, but they heavily rely on the cruise ship industry. And I would say that industry is on its knees right now. I think that you'll see a lot of the smaller operators not be able to come back. And maybe some of the big dogs will be able to get their resources together, and then obviously the relief that might come from the federal government and state governments. But I think a real deliberative and thoughtful conversation needs to be had on that topic locally and countywide. And, right now, again, going back, not to keep saying they're on their knees, but they're vulnerable, and not that we ever want to take advantage of somebody's or some industry's vulnerability, but it sort of puts us in the driving seat. And
Right.
Can we sort of fashion or tailor what that would look like for our community and other communities around Florida? Obviously they're different and have different needs, but would we have them back? And it would be a shame. We have wonderful ports. We have the harbor pilots. We have all the little stores and restaurants and the Hemingway House and so many things that are such wonderful features in Key West proper. And it would be a shame to cut those off to people who want to utilize cruising as their means of vacationing.
Yeah, as an outsider, I couldn't agree more, because I think, and I'm going to come to you and ask you a question, Lee, about that. But I would think that, and I'm sure Stu feels the same way, just from the standpoint that it's, such an important part. And I am sure if I know the history of why people may not want to have cruise ships, they want to preserve the local community, make it feel a little bit more homey, make it feel like it's not outsiders. And now you cross in having 0 cruise ships and all of a sudden completely devastating businesses all the way across the board. No doubt there's going to be a need for talks, but there's going to be a necessity for cruise ships to come in. But no matter what conversation we have about when should we open the government, when shouldn't we, when should you have cruise ships, when shouldn't you, every answer is going to be wrong. No one is going to win on any answer that I've realized, in any question that's going to come up in the next, 12 months. But let me go to you then, Lee, and ask you, because you've lived in Key West for, 30 years or however long you've been down there. But what have you seen in the cruise ships over that whole time frame, if you look at it from a big picture standpoint?
Sure. Well, you know, if you look at a segment of time that's about 30 years, cruise ships are relatively new to Key West. So, I mean, clearly, the Duval Street scene has changed to accommodate cruise ships. And, you know, there's good and bad points with that. I had a conversation with a former mayor of Key West recently, and it was pretty clear that he didn't want to get involved in the conversation, but he offered his opinion to me. And that was, you know, the cruise ship industry is suffering right now. That's going to affect Key West, going to affect Puerto Rico and many other ports. But the one thing we have to remember is that cruise ships are not going to go away. They will probably reduce, and we'll probably see a reduction in Key West rather than 3 a day or 2 a day. You might see 1 a day. And I think that will also then change the flavor of Duval Street and the type of shops that are there. I think it'll be an evolution. I think we're, whether we know it or not, we're preparing for it right now because it's going to happen. It'll be a little bit less. It may ramp up in the future, but I think that's a debate that the locals will have.
Right. Stu, let me come to you and ask you about, you know, all the different hotels and different groups that you work with down there. The cruise ships are probably not necessarily an issue for you when it comes to poker runs, because we deal with that, you know, for offshore racing, but they've been pretty much been able to block that out for the week that we both do the event down there.
Right.
You know, what's it like for you knowing that you bring a lot of people down there and, you know, things are going to be a new norm down there?
Well, I guess, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm somewhat optimistic because, I don't know, we somehow always manage to make things work out. You know, we as an organization, but we've learned to adapt to a lot of situations. But I think the community overall in Key West is also ready to, you know, show their willingness to adapt to this, you know, new normal. So I'm optimistic going forward. I know that we're going to have to make some changes. You know, we are by design an organization that bases its platform on a group setting. You know, we are passionate people. We like to share the camaraderie of the sport with our other fellow boaters from all over the country, all over the world. So our organization is a meeting place for people who share that passion and want to get together with their old friends. And yeah, there's a lot of hugging and kissing and handshakes, and we're a very affectionate group. So that part of it, we're going to have to obviously figure out a way to deal with that. On the business side of that is how we're going to do our functions, how we're going to do our boating events and manage really the logistics of a poker run. Well, you know, we're going to have to do that in a way, the same way that, you know, a wedding organizer is going to manage a large wedding, that a convention planner is going to have to, you know, plan out a large conference. So we'll deal with those issues. But I think that, you know, the boating aspect, the boating side of it is easy to do because right now boating is pretty much opened up around the state of Florida. The marinas opened up this week. The harbors, the boat ramps all opened up. Some of the restrictions with in terms of how we enjoy our boating, such as rafting up, you know, tying 6 or 7 or 8 boats up together. So, you know, you have 6 or 7 people on one boat. Well, now all of a sudden that's about a 100-person party all connected. So those are some of the things that we're going to have to adapt to. But you know, if we want to stay strong, if we want to continue this sport, in which we're all passionate about, we're going to have to learn to adapt. With respect to the hotels and doing business in Key West, you know, the same is true. I think that by the time we get there with our next group, you know, I think that guys like Mark Rossi will have that figured out, you know. So when we go to Rick's, they're going to have rules and guidelines. We need to follow those. The same thing with Sloppy Joe's, the same thing with the Conch Republic Seafood Company and Mickey Perez and his staff. They're going to have all of those guidelines in place, and we're just going to follow, you know, the new rules, really. But I think the boating part is going to be the easy part, really. You know, we're one small, happy little family on one boat, and there's 300 of them coming to town. So it's just what we do on land, I think, are the most critical planning points for us.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stu. I mean, I don't think any one of us here would have been, have ever thought that we would have had these particular types of words come out of our mouth, you know, in scenarios like this. So, Holly, are you a boater?
I am. I actually, my husband is a commercial fisherman on the side. So we have an old Maine lobster boat that he uses. He's got snapper and grouper mahi and amberjack permits. So we go out fishing, and we also have stone crab traps. So in that, I do more fishing than we do recreational boating, but I do have friends that have boats, and I'm always happy to be
a
part
participant.
of that.
Well, no doubt, I'm sure we're able to bring your shipping vessel on Stu's next adventure, possibly in one of our races that we have. So that might be a new class for both of us. But all right, let's stick with you, Holly, for one more. Did I hear correctly then that it looks like they're still keeping the keys closed all the way through at the end of May?
Yes. So closed is, that can
Right.
be interpreted in many ways. So what everybody is hoping is that we're going to keep the checkpoint in place. So right now there's a checkpoint right at the county line, and then also on Card Sound Road. Basically, we're just allowing essential workers that live on the mainland to come down here, do their thing. We're allowing locals to go up to the mainland, go to, Home Depot or whatever, they might have business up there, and come back. What we're not allowing is the day trippers. And a lot of them come from Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County down here. And those are obviously some big hot spots in our state. So essentially we are still closed, but what we're hoping, and definitely hoping here at the local level, and I've heard from so many businesses and so many residents, that we are starting and will start in the next couple of days even to do a soft opening, whether it's restaurants and as was mentioned, Key West opened their beaches and some parks. I mean, people are ready to get outside, are ready to get back to work. We've got a very low caseload. One of my other jobs is I actually work at Mariners and for Fishermen's Hospitals both. And we don't have anybody hospitalized right now for COVID, which is a great thing. That means that all of these measures worked. And so everybody's kind of, like we talked about earlier, preparing for the hurricane. Where's that hurricane? Okay, and it never came, but that's good.
Right.
But now, how do we deliberatively move forward safely?
Right. Well, I would totally agree with you from the standpoint that this epic moment that we've gone through of shelter in place has definitely done unbelievably well, without a doubt. The one thing I just haven't seen on the news a lot is any discussion about what the heat has done, successfully or unsuccessfully. And I'll really be curious and hope that Florida's success and maybe Texas' success and all of that shows that, thank God, here we are in May, that maybe some of that heat does ultimately help, I guess the mitigation of just all passing around and what's happening. So it's unbelievable. So I'm sticking with you one more time, Holly. And I read that while we're definitely talking hot temperatures, I heard you guys had actually down there.
Mm-hmm.
You don't seem to be like born and raised in Key Largo. So how in the world did you make it from Alaska to definitely the southernmost point in the United States, give or take 100 miles?
Sure. And hey, that's part of the district. So I so my family roots are in Florida. So from a very young age, I think I was a baby the first time that we vacationed in Florida. I knew that I loved Florida, and I had roots here. My dad's whole side of his family is from there. But yeah, I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. So I'm an Alaska native. And I grew up fishing and hiking and doing all the fun things that we do in Alaska, but the cold weather just got to me. And again, having vacationed my whole life in Florida, I'm like, man, as soon as I'm out of here. So I applied to Florida State University and go Noles.
Right.
And I wanted to get into politics, like political science, not necessarily run for office, but Tallahassee was the capital of Florida. I thought, surely I can get a job. And I graduated with my degree in political science and got a job right out of college, right here in the Florida Keys, working for the late, great Representative Ken Sorensen. And then after that, the great, still around, thankfully, right, Representative Ron Saunders. So after Ron ran for Senate, he, unsuccessfully, unfortunately, but I ran in his seat. And here I am 8 years later.
Good for you. Well, can you think of anything, or what would be the one thing that you could reflect back on up until those 19 years and say, this might be one really big thing I miss from Anchorage?
The outdoors, that's easy. It's so majestic. Anchorage is surrounded by mountains, and my family was in aviation. So my dad's an aircraft mechanic. My grandpa was a was a bush pilot, and then my uncle was a flight instructor. Now, subsequently, his kids are flight instructors now and pilots for Alaska Airlines. And just being able to access the beauty that Alaska is via the air is something that I do miss.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I mean, definitely, I guess I hate to say see it on TV, but see a lot of that on television. So, hey, Stu, it's all right. I'm coming back to you, Stu. You've been throttling a boat and running around on a boat for probably many years. I won't age you, but you definitely have been doing the Poker Run series for a long time. So what have you seen change over the whole Poker Run series? Not just you, your competition, but what's the overall 30,000 foot level thing that you've seen in what you do?
You're saying in the last decade or just over since coronavirus pandemic?
No, last decade plus, yeah.
Well, the good news, I guess the first and most obvious thing is tremendous amount of growth in our sector. What I've seen is a sport that didn't exist when I got into this. When I got into this, guys like Larry and I were hanging around the boat races going, wow, this is so cool. Larry and I are pretty close in age, but 30 years ago, if you went to a powerboat race, there was just nothing better. But I didn't envision myself as being a guy, a transplanted Canadian who left for the same reasons I think that Holly did. I was tired of the cold and everything, but I got into a sport that I started to see could be more of a recreational, rather than be a professional boat racer rather, and drive around in a big loud boat and, spend a lot of money doing it. I envisioned the sport being something where you could get into a more recreational version. So the beginning of it all, that was in its infancy, was in the early 90s, and that's what poker runs became. So the first thing observation I can make is that poker runs didn't really exist anywhere near in the capacity that they do now. So tremendous amount of growth from a industry that basically started out of poker runs. The second observation I've made is that this sport, this recreation, has taken a huge sector of the marine recreational sector and transformed a lot of people from big expensive yachts that were tired of sipping tea and waving at their neighbors from 500 yards, and they got into this sport because they could go and drive around in a big performance center console and meet all their friends, and there was a lot more camaraderie. So I've seen a huge transition into what I call the converted fishing boat.
Right.
And this is a whole new industry, and it's gone here because of poker run. So the biggest, most powerful transition that's happened is that people took the concept of an open console, center console fishing style boat, made it bigger, made it longer, made it wider, and put on, at the same time, Mercury Marine developed the most reliable outboards, that have ever been built with these Mercury Verados, and, they've been tuned to have a racing, equivalent. So we have this whole sport now that doesn't pollute at all. These Verados are the cleanest running motors, most fuel efficient and cleanest running motors that have ever been built. We're not loud. We're not the stereotype that we had in the 90s and say up to about 10 years ago of being big, loud power boaters polluting. These people in the Keys hated it when we blew through. Well, Holly, you're in the Keys a lot. You probably, everyone's had an experience where we blew through town at one point and we made a lot of noise. So we don't make as much noise. We don't pollute as much. We certainly don't have deep drops, so we don't touch the bottom. We don't break anything up. And guess what? We don't fish. So we're not taking from the environment. We're not putting into the environment. We're not, it's a whole new caliber of boater now that is really what this sport represents. And I'm happy about that. So that's the biggest and most powerful change that's happened in the last decade on our side. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would witness that. I mean, interesting, not only, and there's definitely been very little blood on those center consoles. Everyone's interested in having a good time and not a lot of fishing, but you're right. They've gotten wider and longer and more efficient. But, Lee, what do you think, as you look at both kinds of boats, both kinds of industries, which is the poker runners, and you've been around offshore maybe even longer than me. I've only got about 22 years in it, so you're surely got to be older. So what do you think overall as you see these guys talking about where we've been. Now, what do you see with pandemic and, you know, the way that, you know, I can go through a grocery store and I see people dodging out of the way because I'm walking through, and I'm like, why is everyone dodging away from me? So what do you think that's going to be like in the future for these?
I think they were dodging away because you forgot your mask. That's
Yeah,
why
that's
they were
possible.
dodging.
They know you.
Yeah.
I
They
guess.
know you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's
So,
because I wear a skull mask and goggles. I don't know.
Look, everything has changed. You know, when you think about how, as Stu was saying, how communal we were, we'd all be high-fiving and hugging and all that, and raft ups, and this is completely changed. We have a whole new perspective of how we can get infected or not by doing certain things. It's a whole new norm that we're going to live through, and this is going to be an evolution over the next 24 months, I believe, whether it's voting or at work. I mean, think about how many people are at home working right now, right? So it's a huge number. Everything is changing. So we're going to see some very interesting changes in the boating community. Raft ups, I think, are going to be raft aparts, but
Right.
we'll all be out there, and we're going to enjoy that for sure. You know, I think in particular for Key West and the lower Keys, that's a very condensed strip that runs down south of Homestead. And it's tricky. And I give them a lot of credit for opening up the way they are now. But that's a very tricky thing because there's only one way in, one way out. And it's very tight quarters.
Right.
So my hats are off to the folks in charge in Monroe County for doing what they're doing. But boating in general will survive. It's one of the fastest growing segments in the United States for recreation, if you include stand-up paddle sports and other types of water sports. So
Without a doubt.
it is growing, and I see that in the life jacket industry. I'm a huge advocate of boating safety, and the primary thing is wear your life jacket, whether you're a stand-up paddleboarder or you're out on one of Stu Jones's quiet outboard boats.
Right.
So, but it absolutely is going to change for everyone in the next 24 months.
Right. Larry, what, you know, we've talked a couple times about, you know, the uncertainty of when the races are going to start. And, you know, we've encouraged whatever organization it is to hopefully they get a chance to kick it off and be first wherever that may be in city or state. But, you know, Clearwater comes up at the end of September. And then, you know, we talked about Key West. And I know we've had a lot of meetings with, you know, different groups and everyone sort of marching forward. But from your standpoint, it's got to be a little bit more difficult to think who's coming, what's it going to look like, what are the hotels going to look like, what are, you know, who's going to fill up Duval Street? I mean, what it's going to be like.
Oh yeah, it's, you know, we have a race scheduled in New York on middle of July, which we have a meeting with the city on the 21st of May. I don't know what's going to happen there. You know, if the city said, yes, let's put this event on, and the governor of New York says you can do it, we'd have to go back to all of the race teams and all that, see if they all really want to do that and make it happen. You know, when this first started, I thought, no problem. You know, we're not till July. It'll be good. Now I'm not so sure. Then we come up with Clearwater in September, and you know, we discussed it with the promoter and everybody there, and everything's a go. There again, I don't know what to do. You know, I'm sitting here. You know, we can't go and hook up hotel rooms. We can't go. You know, because we bring in a lot of people, our staff, our people, and we can't really do anything. I can't get my insurance through, you know, we're doing APBA events and through APBA until
You know what's going on.
we know what's going on. You know, we got the big premiums to pay for that. And then I've got Key West. Now, Key West, you know, I've had many conversations with many teams, and all saying that, hey, if the season's shot, at least we got Key West. We're going to come to Key West. We'll all be in Key West. I hope that's true. I hope we're able to do that. But there again, you know, we put in for our permits from Coast Guard for Clearwater. We put it in for Key West from the Coast Guard. We've done everything we can do until we sort of get a okay start. So what I feel like is like we were last year at this time. Last year, we were fighting to get the Key West event, you know, we did the request for proposals and did all this stuff. And we didn't know that we had Key West event until July or June, excuse me, end of June. So it's like we were sitting there waiting what to do. And then when we got the approval from the city for the 5-year contract, then we went to work and it turned out fabulous. Well, I went around and met with businesses and this and came up with funding because we weren't able to get TDC money last year. So, which it's always been given all, you know, for every race up till the one that I did, you know, and I wasn't approved for. So I started out $150,000 in the hole, you know, not getting that. So we made it. We did a great event. We did a lot of changes that I wanted to do with a concert in a week. We had Fury on board with the shuttle boats and bringing people in and out, and it turned out fabulous. And so my thought this year, before all this happened, well, maybe we're going to have more concerts. Maybe we're going to do some more things, add some more things. Well, I'm in the same boat I was last year. I can't do anything until I know what's going to happen.
Well, you look a little stressed out. Is that why you have this growing on?
Yeah, well, I've never had a beard in my life, and I had
just so you know, Stu, he looks a lot older than you now.
Hey, wait a minute! You haven't seen me for a while.
Oh, maybe you're doing the same thing. So everybody's sheltered and growing in place.
I was with my banker, and I told him he helps me out with a lot of stuff with racing. You probably know him, Holly, Kurt Lewin with the bank. And
he's the best.
I said, you know, Kurt, until you guys give me some money, I'm not going to shave. And he goes, well, okay, Rumpelstiltskin, you know, you're going to be a while. So I told him every time I go in there, I said, Kurt, I'm not shaving until you give me some money. So,
love it.
So at least next week when we see you, maybe you'll be shaving.
Yeah,
right? If it happens. So,
but yeah, you know, it's, I'm just sitting, you know, there's a million things to do, and I seem to be working every day, all day long, and I can't move forward. I feel like I was last year.
Stu, how do you feel, Stu, about Key West?
I'm optimistic based on what I'm seeing. I mean, things are happening right now. You know, the fact that Monroe County is open, you know, not to us, but to, at least to the residents, and the parks and the marinas and the boating, and then it'll be 25% capacity at restaurants, and then it'll be the hotels. And I mean, this whole thing unraveled in what, 2 months and 8 weeks, and it's gotta find its way back in how many weeks is that? It's got to be 4 months, 5 months. Yeah. I mean, I'm signing people up. You know, I'm basing my year to be at least come out of this year without being totally ruined.
No,
I'm basing it on at least getting 2 or 3 events out, you know, in the fall. Yeah. I'm being realistic. I'm not expecting anything out of the summer. But you know, I think there's this talk. We watch the news every day, and they've got this, not cure, but they've at least got a decent treatment that they're developing. That's optimistic. You know, Fauci was going over it this morning on the news with Trump about this, whatever it's called, this medicine that they have. Yeah. I mean, those are the kinds of things that affect the forward movement here. And you know, the stock market rebounded and a little bit, and people are like, wow, that's good news. And I mean, the curve's flattened almost everywhere. I mean, we still have some issues clearly around the rest of the country. We've been lucky down here in Florida, maybe not in our own county here. Right. The Tri-County area is not doing well. So DeSantis said, okay, the rest of Florida can get back to it, which is great. But, you know, Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade, he put the kibosh on that for us here. But Monroe are taking care of themselves, it seems. So without the governor's intervention, they seem to be very, you know, proactive in managing their own affairs, which is good.
Yeah, I think that's great because I think we all definitely need to get safely, on this whole, phasing process. So, and everybody, wants it to be safe, but there are so many millions of people that are struggling. So it's, no one's going to win. So, okay, Holly, back on the hot seat. Is it fair to say that like this is like a farewell tour, or like do you get to say that? Are you going to give us a scoop, like what you're doing next, or
Sure. Well,
Oh, sure. I love hearing that. That's great.
I,
Here you go, guys. This is going to be good.
I was looking forward to coming home, sort of sailing off into the sunset, sharing all the good stuff we got accomplished in Tallahassee. Okay, so now pivot
Right.
to the next thing and talk about going out with a bang. And my team is small, but we're mighty. Like I said, we're just pounding through the unemployment issues and going to be at the table to put our community back together. And, public service isn't always easy. And so this will definitely be one of the more memorable years of my years in public service. But what my plans are, I had a couple things in the mix, but everything's sort of been put on hold. I'm not planning on running for elected office, so just share that around the community. And I think the universe and God are telling me to, go do something else. But I do want to stay in the process somehow. I love it. I'm a lover of public service and state government and maybe a little federal government here and local government. But I think I've got a unique skill set and want to keep using those skills.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let me ask you a question then. Being young and going into politics, and you've been involved for this period of time now. And I even read that you're definitely, like to, get both sides of the parties included. I think that's very necessary in today's politics. People should really look at that more importantly, because if you ride the party line all the way, I don't know that we accomplish the best things, and that's at least my view. So that may not be right, completely. But what's the one thing that really surprised you? And you might have to go over the whole entire time frame that you've been. But
Sure.
what's the one thing is, when you got in there, you're like, holy crap, I didn't know that, or I can't believe, is there anything that stands out to you in that time frame that's just we would not notice or recognize?
I don't know that there's one thing. I mean, there's actually several things that come to mind. And, campaigning is hard, but governing is harder. And learning all the different personalities and just how diverse our state was an incredible experience and something I will always hold on to very tightly. And going back to working both sides of the aisle, I worked for a Republican and I worked for a Democrat and sort of learned how both sides function. And I think if you ask the average American, they're right in the middle. And if you look at our district and the Keys, we're pretty purple. We're right in the middle. And if it's good for our community, then go for it. If it's not, then, let's look for a better option. But I know that I'm the only lady right now amongst our crew. And it was interesting being a woman in public service. I'm not really a big fan of the Me Too movement or anything like that. I actually think it sets us backwards if you ask me. And I think that as a woman and a mom, and I've got other jobs, just kind of finding that balance and not letting the fact that I'm a different gender stop me or slow me down. I mean, I represent the best district and the best community in the entire state and the Southeast and the nation, if you ask me. So it's been a real honor and a wonderful pleasure.
Holly, you got a fantastic attitude. I think we all would definitely agree to that, and the approach that you've taken, and your love for the environment and all that, because we all have that as well. So, Lee, do you have any questions, or you choose to make another announcement or anything yourself, or?
No, I'm not going to make any announcements, but one of the things that bugs me, and Stu and Holly, I need you to weigh in on this for me.
Okay, let me mute. Let me hit mute, everybody.
What's going through my mind has to do with the feedback that I've received from fans and race teams coming out of Key West November of this past year, and it has to do with hotels. It has to do with the cost of bringing a team into Key West, where you got 7 nights, sometimes 8 nights, and a team brings, or they need 6 hotel rooms for 7 nights. And the average cost is running around $400. or higher. And I told a lot of them, I said, well, just drive up to Marathon and you can pay $99 at a name brand place up there.
Mm-hmm.
But no one wants to drive 50 miles back and forth.
Sure.
So, but I just wonder how, or what you, Holly, and what you, Stu, feel about the price of lodging in Key West during race week in particular.
Which is actually early and before season officially really gets going. Before I forget, Larry, you have to follow up with me offline why you didn't get the TDC money. I want to know the backstory on that. Sorry, but I think that's something that needs to be messaged, and I think that the organization as a whole needs to share that with the Key West Chamber of Commerce, with the Florida Keys Restaurant or what is it, the Lodging
Hotel,
Association.
motel.
Hotel, motel.
And the the powers that be, because they sort of got you, right? You have to stay down there. But I think using the point or the fact that the dollars that you all bring in to the community by far outweigh, the hotel costs. So give us a bone here, people. That's
Right.
That would be my message.
Right. Stu, what do you think? I mean, from the standpoint, you run a lot of events, going to Key West, at different times. What's your take on it?
Well, I've been running the Key West Poker Run for 28 years, and in all of those years, we manage lodging for majority of our guests. So we're very, very familiar. That question is got a lot of different answers, but the most obvious one is that sadly is just based on the laws of free enterprise. This is corporate America. A lot of these big chains are owned by very deep pocket corporations who are profit driven, and it's as long as they can fill them. That $250 room at La Concha 10 years ago is now $479. That Hyatt room on Front Street that we used to get for low 300 room is now selling for about $639. So in a matter of 10 years, maybe 12, the rates have more than doubled at some of these properties. And some of the properties, and back to you, Lee, some of the properties on the other side of town are still, I think, somewhat reasonable in their pricing. The ones they're still getting a lot of money, but the rates that we used to pay on Front Street are now being paid on Stock Island. So is there anything we can do about it? Well, I don't know what amount of political pressure is going to change, the power of corporate America and the power of the almighty dollar. They own the property. They have a brand. They market the hell out of their brand. They spend they give back to the bed tax funding. The bed tax funding must have had record numbers in the last 2 years. I'm thinking that the TDC was managing tremendous amount of money in 16, 17, 18, and 19, those last 4 or 5 years, because the rates went up substantially in that time frame. So I don't know what the easy answer is. We have people who are, by the way, Lee, on a slightly different sort of mindset when they go to Key West. The race team that goes to Key West to race and is trying to manage an entire group of people, including all of his team and maybe some of his guests and his sponsor, and he's got to pay for a whole bunch of rooms. Hey, that guy is just, he's going to have to make a decision sooner or later if he can afford to stay in the sport, because he's spending as much on his accommodations as he is on the boat itself when it comes down to the maintenance of the team. I can assure you of that. But these guys that are coming into our sport are deep pocket guys, or they're people that work hard, hardworking entrepreneurs, self-made people, that this is their bucket list poker run. They live in Michigan, they live in Oregon, they live in Canada. They scraping their nickels together to come to this event every year, and if they have to spend $30,000 to do it, they will. So that I'm not saying that's right, but that's the nature of this thing. It's a very, very expensive sport and a very expensive recreation to be in, whether you're on the powerboat racing side or whether you're on the poker run side. And if they absolutely have to stay on Front Street, they want to be in the Pier House, they want to be at the Ocean Key House, they want to be at the Hyatt, They want primo accommodations, and they want the best docking. They want to have a floating dock at the Galleon or a floating dock at A&B Marina.
Right.
They're going to have to pay, because all of those places that I do business with, they want to get paid and they want top dollar. And it's sad. And it's not something I have a lot of control of. I might have fueled the whole thing because I brought so many people and I created the demand. Right. And now the demand is there, and now the hoteliers are raking it in. You're welcome, hoteliers.
Right. Well, I think I could only hope, as long as I'm sure as all of you, that the small businesses around there and everybody can participate, in the activities for this year. And I hope it's a new norm, but I hope it's sort of normal, because everybody likes going to Key West and being normal and going to places they like to go and all that. So we're coming up on top of the hour. I want to make sure we finish with a hard stop before 3 o'clock or at 3 o'clock. Holly, I would say that between all of us, we also all have one more connection, is that, Stu does a tremendous amount of television production, and digital production from the content that he produces for all of his shows and all that stuff. And for Race World, doing the live streams, and they have out of country production companies that come in and do special things like that. And, and I know in the past you've had a lot of interest, or have a lot of interest in having, digital media company or television cruise companies come down to the Keys or anywhere in South Florida to spend the dollars and make opportunities happen for that whole television digital world. So there's definitely a connection there,
Sure.
with all of us there from that standpoint. Do you you want to put anybody on the hot seat yourself, Holly? I mean, surely this is a great chance for us to turn the table, and you can have the mic and put Stu or Lee or Larry, on the hot seat.
Yeah, no big deal. And it's been a real pleasure working with the industry. I wouldn't say that I had a large role. It's always a pleasure to work with the Department of Transportation when everybody needs their permits and so on and so forth. And I actually did that as an aide and have now passed that baton on to my team now. But
well, let me just say, let me interject. This last year, those guys were awesome, because we were brand new with them in Tallahassee. They were fantastic. So thank you for that.
I will share that. And as you know, we have one highway and it's our baby. So, like to take care of it. And I think that I would say that I think taking a conservative approach to having your races is so important. Again, giving some people hope and something to look forward to. My gosh, it's just, everybody's sort of down in the dumps now. And I would say push forward, again, safely. We don't want to be too brazen or anything, but with the races coming up in Clearwater, I think July might be a little iffy, but September, November, I think that we will have moved forward with whatever the new protocol is and all these new, the phraseology that we're going to be using. I'd say plow forward. And one thing that I do, and you sort of mentioned earlier, was, as we do move forward, we're going to be a new planet, we're going to be a new nation, we're going to be a new state, we're going to be a new Florida Keys. And, the talk and the new kid on the block is resiliency. And so as we put these plans into place, I think it's important, because we are enjoying, more sea life, more wildlife, cleaner waters, cleaner air. How can we continue that while not, while not delaying progress? I think should be an important component of our conversation moving forward. And this has been a totally fun Thursday for me, because again, something out of the norm.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us here today. We really appreciate it. And Stu, the same for you. Definitely appreciate you joining us from Pompano, Florida, and either getting off your boat or getting out of the office and spending a few minutes. We definitely worked, I know Larry was happy to work with you this past year in Key West. So Larry, final words?
Just I want to thank Holly for coming on and listening to us, and liked hearing about you, and wish you were going back into politics and all that. But,
never say never, right?
Say never.
Yeah.
And Stu, thank you, buddy. And we're going to partner up again this year in Key West and make it bigger and better.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Nice meeting with you, Holly, and nice to listen to. It sounds like you've had a great career. I did notice some of your accomplishments on Wikipedia. I looked you up. And we didn't even scratch the surface of all the cool things you've done. So congratulations for having a great career at such a young age.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Stu. Appreciate that. And everybody, that was fantastic. I really appreciate everybody's time. And I think we sort of made it right at 3 o'clock. So, all right, everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.